My name is John Fields, and I'm the Lydia, Cheney, and Jim Sokol Endowed Director of AEIVA. I did see a lot of people in the chat that I didn't recognize, so just in case you don't know what we're about at AEIVA, we are a visual arts center located on the campus of the University of Alabama at Birmingham. We present 8 to 10 exhibitions a year, highlighting a mix of regionally, nationally, and internationally acclaimed artists focused almost exclusively on contemporary art. We serve a diverse audience of university faculty, staff, and students, artists, museum patrons, and donors, while simultaneously striving to keep our exhibitions directly relevant and engaging to our surrounding Birmingham communities. We help represent the visual arts at UAB to local and regional institutions, but also the national and international art community. Since 2014, AEIVA has been featured in the New York Times, the Huffington Post, The Nation, Raw Vision Magazine, PBS Canvas, among others. And we are proud that all of our exhibitions and the majority of our related educational programming are free and open to the public. So tonight we're celebrating the opening of an exhibition that's almost 2 years in the making. And so a la carte features 37 nationally and internationally renowned contemporary artists whose work utilizes food to explore relevant contemporary social and cultural issues. These works examine the role of food in advertising, popular culture, nutrition, activism, food disparities, globalization, sexuality, spirituality, workers' rights, cultural identity, sustainability, and many, many, many other topics, hence the name a la carte. And that's sort of what we believe contemporary art does really well. It's really the whole point of what we do here at AEIVA, which is to exhibit artworks that let us engage our community in vital and relevant conversation about the world around us. And so since the quarantine, AEIVA has been hosting a series of weekly live Zoom events featuring discussions and interviews with artists, curators, galleries, collectors, and arts educators from all over the country, with guests from many corners of the globe. And we, at this point, honestly, we're going to keep doing this until people stop showing up. And then the a la carte specific programming will run all the way through close to the end of December. And so a lot of people have asked me about public access to this exhibition because the exhibition is actually physically installed in our galleries. And I am happy to sort of officially announce that that our reopening plan was formally approved by UAB very recently. And we will be offering limited public viewings of a la carte this fall. And so we're still kind of like finalizing the real, how to sort of like disseminate that information to everyone. And we'll announce those details in the coming days. So please check our website or our social media for updates if you decide you really would like to come see the exhibit. We put a lot of work into the exhibit, and we would love people to actually get to see it. So please keep an eye out for that. But tonight, we're sort of officially kicking off the exhibition and several weeks of planned virtual programming. And for the next hour, you will hear from myself and AEIVA's Assistant Curator, Tina Ruggieri, as we discuss just a few of our favorite works in the exhibit. And then most importantly, we will hear from 4 artists who are featured in the exhibit, who are joining us from various parts of the United States. And then each artist will get several minutes to talk about their works in the exhibition. Afterwards, we will take questions for those of you watching from home. And so please submit any questions or comments you might have in the chat feature. And we'll be able to we'll get to as many of them as we possibly can. Like I mentioned before, there are 37 artists represented in the exhibit with more than 70 artworks, I think, total. And so there's no way we're going to get to all of the works tonight. But we are working really hard between now and the end of the year to sort of touch on every artist who is in the show through either our social media or through virtual events like tonight. And so what you're seeing on the screen right now, this is actually a shot inside of AEIVA's first gallery. And so this is the first thing you see when you walk in the door. And I often like to start off talking about a la carte by talking about these 2 large-scale photorealistic cheeseburger paintings that you see in the middle of the screen. These works are by a German-based artist named Mike Boucher. And so Mike is a multimedia artist that has made a career out of using his art to address contemporary notions of ownership and consumerism. On the immediate surface, these works are heavily referencing the illustrative aesthetics of sort of fast food advertising from decades past. Basically, like what we were talking about a minute ago with the Romper Room, like from that era when that sort of advertising was actually hand painted and hand drawn. But what is not immediately apparent is that the physical production of these paintings were actually outsourced to artists in China. And so through this act, which the artist does not try to hide, Boucher is simultaneously commenting on industrial globalization, but also making interesting comments about both the food industry and the art world. And so in the art world, it's often common for artists of a certain level of fame to employ assistants to manage the actual physical production of their artistic visions, leading to some very interesting and complicated conversations about artistic and intellectual ownership. But this is also very much something we see in the food industry, where the food you consume is not always directly prepared by the chef who serves as the face of a particular restaurant. So we thought this sort of unspoken question posed by Boucher's paintings of who actually gets to take credit for these two paintings, or for that matter, your dinner, was a really interesting one, and in a lot of ways represented the types of conversations that we hoped to spark with this exhibition. I think we can go to the next slide, Amanda.
Okay, so this is artist Christina Nicodema. She is a Brooklyn-based artist. In her complex compositions, she explores ideas regarding humanity's position in the food chain. Nicodema's interests often lie in the arbitrary line that separates an animal's role as pet versus food. She often makes connections and is inspired by art history, from the Dutch still life masters of the 17th century to the modern painters of the 21st century. She uses the internet as a source of inspiration, gathering thousands of images to create her compositions. She utilizes digital technology, such as Photoshop, to create what she calls underpaintings. Then, through a variety of painting techniques, she destroys these underpaintings, creating her own unique vision. One has to really stand in front of a Christina Nicodema's work to understand just how extremely complex and layered and textured these paintings truly are. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to see her work in person for the first time in New York, I guess this past January during our first UAB art strip. Both John and I knew that Nicodema's work was an absolute perfect fit for a la carte. And you can scroll through some of them. So these are the two that are in the show. And this is the Raft of the Medusa, which is a reference to Theodore Géricault's The Raft of Medusa from, I can't remember the date. And then this is the installation view, and you can see her paintings in the back. The vitrine in the front are a Birmingham artist, Frank Fleming, these kind of surrealist ceramic sculptures on loan from the Birmingham Museum of Art. Also on loan are the Robert Rauschenberg chow bags on the right side of your screen. And then on the left, we have Most Tolliver, known as Most T, David Sandlin, and Roscoe Hall. And
Which brings me to my next painting of choice, which is this painting by Roscoe Hall, who is a Birmingham-based chef and visual artist. In his painting Seed In, Seed Out, which he created specifically for this exhibition, Hall blends his knowledge of food and art to illustrate the long protested issues of food deserts within minority communities and the impact of structural racism on access to a nutritious diet. In this painting, a lone black male overlooks a field of cacti in the form of gold-plated forks with bright teal tips. The teal actually references his grandmother's Haitian heritage and apparently had a huge influence on her cooking, which is primarily important once you know that Roscoe is actually the grandson of Dreamland Barbecue's legendary John Big Daddy Bishop. And so this figure's gold chains adorn his neck, and while advertisements are plastered throughout the field, beckoning the next local consumer into its gilded trap. The gold chains and forks are illusions of grandeur and a distraction from the real problem of access to healthy food and education. Food deserts are a huge issue in Birmingham, and so this is another important conversation that we're hoping to have over the next several months. Roscoe was supposed to be very involved in some early virtual programming, but he had to unexpectedly go out of town for an entire month. And so when he gets back, we're gonna swing back around to Roscoe and do some programming with him. He created a very kind of amazing recipe specifically for the exhibition. And so there you see the installation in the context of his painting there on the left. So I think you can go to the next slide, Amanda.
All right, so Wayne Thiebaud. American artist Wayne Thiebaud is best known for his luscious paintings of cakes and pies, ice cream cones, cupcakes, and other edible treats. His visual language is unmistakable, with its thick gestural brushwork and realistic color palettes. Thiebaud's Fish Circle, which is on loan from the Birmingham Museum of Art, replaces the traditional meal with a seafood feast. These fish could have been recently caught or purchased from the freezer section. The simplicity of the composition adds to the convenience of accessibility only available through mass consumerism's permanence. Thiebaud is also known for this repetition of subject matter. So while making comments on mass consumption, he simultaneously reinvented the traditional still life. Probably most of us in this room are familiar with Thiebaud's work. He's a modern master and an artistic giant. And we both felt that it was extremely important to have Thiebaud's work in this exhibition to help contextualize contemporary artists that have come after him. And I would like to thank, again, the Birmingham Museum of Art for loaning us this magnificent work. It's not very big, but it's absolutely a powerhouse. And then you can see it in its context. We have the Henry Hargreaves Burning Calories, and I think it's Richard Olney. Yeah, thank you. Next to it.
Oh, and so this is another piece that we very early on knew would be included in the exhibition. Celestia Morgan is one of the most vital visual artists to come out of Birmingham in a really, really long time. Hopefully you saw her recent exhibition, Redline, which was on display not too long ago at the Birmingham Museum of Art. But this piece was one of her earliest works that sort of got her attention from the art community. And so in this series, Morgan is exploring how our family recipes anchor us to our generational past. And so the simple act of making her grandmother's biscuit recipe, a woman that she never actually met, becomes this kind of powerful and almost spiritual vessel for her family's tradition and culture. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this piece was shown. Was this piece shown in the first state of the art, Tina? I can't remember. But anyway, so we'll be talking a lot. Talking a lot about Morgan's work in the coming weeks. On October 27th, she will join us along with Chef Kenneth Moore and Dr. Beth Kitchen from UAB Nutrition Sciences and Dr. Mary Boggiano from the UAB Department of Psychology for a panel discussion where we will sort of dive a little deeper into a lot of the things I've talked about so far and how food intersects various facets of our culture, including nutrition, mental health, cultural traditions, but also food disparities and more.
You can go to the. Okay, so Paul Kramer is a Houston-based artist. He started his career as a graphic designer, creating websites for musicians such as Lou Reed. Since then, Kramer has earned national recognition as a contemporary abstract painter. He masterminded the popular Tumblr page called Great Art in Ugly Rooms, and it's a series where Kramer takes historically significant artworks and digitally superimposes them into what is considered to be an ugly room. Kramer's unparalleled technical proficiency creates such a believable image that many viewers believe these photographs are real. In Kramer's Oldenburg floor burger, Klaus Oldenburg's soft burger, created in 1962 and currently is housed at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, is superimposed into an attic space. The image plays on Oldenburg's reputation as a pop artist, taking everyday objects and turning them into soft sculptures, and in doing so, deconstructing the hierarchy of fine art. Kramer's image hints that someone might be using this iconic artwork as a beanbag chair while watching their favorite late-night television shows. Simultaneously, the impossibility of such a large sculpture and such a small space adds to the absurdity of this situation. And I believe there's an important moment happening in contemporary art in Houston. You have artists that were born there and have since moved and settled in other cities, like Will Boone and Justin Adian, to those who still live and work there, such as Mark Flood and Paul Kramer. And I believe Kramer is one of those unique talents that I believe has a unique voice while understanding the context of who came before him. And he brilliantly carries out the tradition of minimal and color-filled painting while also pushing the boundaries of digital technologies. And so you can see his work there. Sorry.
He's also a really nice guy.
Yeah, he's a really great guy. If you're ever in Houston, look him up. And so now we're going to get into some of the artists that are on our talk with us tonight. So Henry Hargreaves is a Brooklyn-based photographer who pushes the boundaries of still life photography to examine critical contemporary cultural issues through our interactions with food. Hargreaves has been included in exhibitions worldwide, including the Hungarian Museum of Trade and Tourism, the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, and the British Museum of Food. He has been included in publications such as The New Yorker, The New York Times, and National Geographic. Tonight, Henry Hargreaves is going to discuss two different series, The Burning Calories and Power Hungry. So I'll hand it over to Henry.
Oh, you're muted, Henry.
We good now?
Yeah,
We're good.
great.
Great. Cool. Hey, well, look, thanks so much for having me here, guys. And like, what a terrific exhibition. And like, I'm just so flattered to be amongst all these really, really amazing, like, and profound artists. So I'm pleased to be able to talk first, so I'm not sort of intimidated in being at the back of the line. So look, let me sort of, I've got a couple of pieces from a couple of series. As Tina and John mentioned in there, and they both kind of touch on, quite different themes. I've got Burning Calories, which is a bit lighter and more fun, and Power Hungry, which is a little bit sort of deeper and a bit more of a political statement. So I'll start with the Burning Calories, which you saw as I was showing some of the pictures, which was some of the fast food that was on fire. And they were actually cakes. It was a series that I did with a cake artist, and we made all fast food into these really, really intricate cakes, and essentially just set them on fire, as the series would suggest. And it was kind of a bit of a play on the sort of the talk and obsession about burning calories and exercise and calorie counting, and which also is kind of ironic, because today I was actually shooting a commercial photography job for an indoor rowing machine. So it kind of played into that well in isolation, burning calories, and then be talking about this later on today. But I mean, in these two series also sort of touch on two things that happen with my work. One of them is very much entertainment, and another is sort of using the sort of the position that I'm in to also get people to try to just to think deeper about things, and using food as this common denominator. Because I think food is really powerful, because no matter who we are, we all have emotions tied up with it, and it all means something to us, and it all means something different to everyone. And to me, what I hope to do with my work is just to hold a little bit of a mirror up to something where people can read their own interpretation of it. And so this series was kind of just sort of riffing on, the double entendre of burning calories, and I wanted to make something that just like looked really fun and luscious, and also, in a sort of this society about consumption and such, ephemeral beauty, that was sort of really just playing into this. So, without sort of going on too much more, I'm, totally open to any questions. That's sort of where Burning Calories comes in at. And then on the other side with Power Hungry, this was a series where essentially it's a diptych, and it started off by looking at meals eaten by oppressors, dictators, and people in power versus the meal that essentially the people who they were oppressing were eating. And it started kind of with some of the more historic dictators and regimes, with sort of the pharaohs in Egypt and sort of kings. And then it came to a more contemporary lens. And the two pieces that I believe are in this exhibition are North Korea and contemporary USA. And so with North Korea, what was one of the things that drove this series was several years ago when I did it, which was probably 3 or 4 years ago. Kim Jong-un got sick with what was considered gout, and and he sort of had been out of the public spotlight for a while. And when we saw pictures of him again, everyone was kind of staggered at how heavy he had got and visually like unwell. And I'd read some. They were saying that he had this sort of addiction for edible cheese and Chinese boiled lollies, and whilst 2/3 of the North Korean population was essentially starving. And so I sort of wanted to juxtapose this as a table for two, and actually each one of these meals are shot at the same table. And when you're at the side of the power, you can't really even see what's happening at the other end of the table. There's just such a plentiful buffet of food out that, is kind of blinded by what's happening at the other side. Whereas when you're at the other side, it's almost like this very underwhelming dish, and then, sort of staring up there to what's on the other side. And, and in a much more of a historical context about how food throughout the ages and access to food has always been one of the key ways to keep the power disparity. Whether we go back to medieval times, and it was, let's just cut the castle off from its its ability, its farms and its land and everything, and we'll just wait until they come out. To where I see it much more today with the USA one, which was more just coming back to what you guys are mentioning about food deserts, or as I think it's starting to be described also as food apartheid, where it's not just where it's not just socioeconomically, it's also really based on access, much more based on race as well. And in the USA one, that was sort of what I wanted to illustrate there, that where food insecurity is also means that when you get food in these places, it's food that isn't really nourishing you and isn't really helping you get ahead. It's really kind of like keeping you down. You starts to trigger a whole spate of other problems that are all health related, which kind of keep this whole population down and in their place. So that's where power hungry was really sort of coming to, and just like looking at how food is used as this tool to keep this imbalance of power. And how it was much more explicit and easily done and easily seen once upon a time, and now it kind of is much is still very, very present, but often subtler.
Henry, we have one question already specifically for you. I'm gonna read that before we move on to the next artist. So, why did you choose to recreate the fast food out of cake rather than just purchase/use the original?
I mean, to me, so I've got a studio in Brooklyn, and I've got lots of time on my hands, and I like to just push the envelope and kind of test things. And it was there was a cake artist who had spoken to me about doing a collaboration together, and I'd actually spoken about doing it with just setting fast food on fire, and it just felt like you could push the envelope a little bit further, and I was like, let's try and do this out of cake. And so that was the genesis to that. And and I think for me, so much of what I do is about play, and will it work? Why not work? Let's try it. Let's at least have some fun on the way, and see where we get to.
Awesome. Well, and I have a question for you, but I'm going to save it to the Q&A part.
Sure.
We're gonna move on to let's see here. go back to my notes. So we're going to move on to an artist named Andrew Moore. Um, Andrew Moore is a celebrated American artist known primarily for his large format color photographs that document the effect of time on natural and man-made landscapes, from Russia to Cuba to right here in Alabama. Moore's work has been exhibited all over the country and resides in numerous collections, such as the Whitney Museum of American Art and the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Moore received a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2014 and in 2004 a special jury prize at the Sundance Film Festival. And so tonight he's going to talk about two works of his that are in the exhibition from the series he did not too long ago entitled Blue Alabama. Thanks, Andrew, for being here.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, Tina. And thanks everyone else. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting to be included in this show because the projects that I work on take years, and one of my processes is knocking on doors and meeting people, that strangers, and getting to know them. And I would say that food is actually one of the great connectivities in that process of meeting people and actually sharing a meal. And in many cases in Alabama, the friends who were with me, we actually would often bring meals to people or invite them out or cook together. And so food was one of the really, especially in the South, I would say. I mean, I would say conversation and food were the two means to kind of enter people's worlds. And so I would say probably played as big a role as anything in terms of connecting to people, gaining a certain trust, creating, allowing me to kind of have a more intimate view of their homes and places of work. Because what I like best is I love shooting interiors, because for me it's kind of a portrait of people's minds, portrait of their life, even in a sense. So in this first picture here that we're looking at, Yolanda Walker at the Purple Bowl in Pink Bottom, Alabama. So I spent a lot of time in Camden and in Demopolis in the Lower Alabama and the Black Belt, and I'd heard about this place called Pink Bottom, and I just thought, oh, that is such a crazy name for a town. I will have to go there. I couldn't find it on a map. Didn't exist on maps anymore, and so kind of somebody said, well, you go down this road and you make a left, you turn right at the church, you fall down, and then you'll get there. But there was actually no sign to this town. All there was this building that was painted purple in the town of Pink Bottom. So of course had to go inside, and the entire interior was painted purple. I mean, what you don't see in like the chairs and the tables and everything was painted purple in this little store. And there was this lovely woman, and everything was very neatly organized, kind of very basic, but everything you would need, milk and eggs and beans and coffee and so we sat down, and this is a great little detail. You can see, I got to get rid of my own view here so I can read it. So coffee was $1.50. Refill was 50 cents. Okay, that makes sense. Use your own cup, $2. Now that kind of, it's like, okay, so people are bringing these massive cups in. It was like, I guess people kind of brought in, like, kind of abused that. So it was $2, and then refill your own cup was $1. So it was, and there's a lot of other details in this, but she was very lovely. You just kind of felt it that this was the only store in town, and so people came there and got sandwiches and hung out. And anyway, so that's the story of Yolanda Walker. I mean, and also thinking about the small towns and small stores and small general stores in the South, and there was just something special about this place. I mean, it was modern. It was run by a young woman, and it was the center of this community. So that's the story of that picture. And John, we'll move on. Okay, and so then in Camden, there was this little grocery store. It actually had been a movie theater before, and it was one of those old-timey supermarkets with, you know, handmade signs and magic marker, and kind of a jumble of things, not too big. And the thing was, it was competing with a really large Piggly Wiggly, which was just about a half mile away down the road in Camden, and I couldn't believe it was still there. Anyway, so the guy in the picture is the owner. His name's Henry McIntosh. He started out as a butcher in the 60s and eventually acquired the store. If you know, I love the super large cans of beans and the meat specials. And also, if you look at the detail on the left side of that old telephone, which I love, it's a rotary telephone, and you can see there's a kind of worn away part of the wall next to the phone. And you know, I realized I'd been looking at this picture for a long time. I was like, okay, so that's where somebody put their left hand, because that's a big old freezer door, and you put your left hand there to pull that door with your right hand. And you know, how many times that door have been opened and shut over the, 50, 60 years that this store has been running. Yeah, just extra size beans. And, obviously there's a certain relationship to certain kinds of, Walker Evans and certain kinds of formal photography, but also, the play of words. I mean, obviously there was a big thing that said meat, so I've kind of just framed it so it says eat, obviously, and the red, because the store was called Henry's Red and White. And it's the last bit of irony in this is that, well, anyway, the reason why he survived in business all those years, competing especially with a Piggly Wiggly, was that he said it was friendliness, but in fact he gave credit to everybody. I mean, he extended credit to all his customers. Didn't matter who they were. People could buy in credit in this store, and I think that's one of the things that kept him in business all these years in the town of Camden. And sadly, about 6 months after I took this picture, Henry's Red and White closed. It's gone now. So I often find that with these things that I kind of explore or kind of end up in, is that there are often things that are going away or just about to go away. And so that all that's really left is this picture, in a sense. I don't know how many other pictures there are of Henry's Red and White. But anyway, thank you. And that was my, I'm happy to be part of the show. And if you see, they're actually kind of large prints. They're about 50s, 60s. And so if you ever get to see the show or be there, you can actually kind of step in and see all those details. So thank you, John and Christina. And thank you, everyone else.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. That was great.
Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next artist.
All right, so Sean Raspet is an American artist who is known for incorporating ideas of science and technology into his artistic practice. His artworks often consist of liquid chemical formulations of artificial flavor and fragrance molecules. In recent years, his work has involved food, nutrition, human metabolism, and human cellular development via stem cells. Raspet has had shows all over the world, including Society in Berlin, Germany, the Artists Institute at Hunter College in New York, Jessica Silverman Gallery in San Francisco, and the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago. Tonight, Raspet is going to discuss a company he helped create called Non-Food and discuss the work in the exhibition, The Non-Bar.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. And yeah, very happy to be part of this amazing show, and really cool that this show was put together around the topic of food, which I think is so important, and has so many different layers and ways to think about it. And I'm actually trying to reopen my screen because something happened on my computer just as you were introducing me. But let me see here. Nope. Nope. Sorry, everyone. Because basically, like my phone rang, and then it just, because it gets routed through the computer, it just like changed everything. Anyway, I'm just going to keep going though.
Yeah, we can still hear you and see you just fine.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah, basically, I think to go back a little bit before this particular work, for context, yeah, I became very interested in artificial flavors and kind of chemistry, and basically that comes from an interest in kind of what the built environment is made of. I studied sculpture quite a long time ago, but I think over many years, my interests went from thinking about materials in the sense that maybe people think of it in terms of sculpture or installation, and down to what are those materials made of, like the structures underlying that, and a lot of that has to do with chemistry. And the great thing about kind of flavor and the sense of smell is that that's how our bodies kind of understand chemicals. That's how they understand the world around us. Since everything is chemical, everything is made of molecules. Our kind of bodies over time have evolved, these kind of senses that can kind of sense the difference between different molecules, and that's what smell and taste is. So I got really interested in artificial flavors as a way to kind of work with those senses. And over time, I eventually got hired by a company called Soylent that makes kind of meal replacements. And the idea was I would kind of design flavors for them. And it was kind of it was a real job, but it also in a way was oops. I'm just going to show some. I'm just going to change my view real quick. Okay. Anyway, it was a real job, but for me, I also saw it as kind of an extension of my art practice. I was interested in kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, kind of blurring the line between what I would call like the art economy and then the mass economy, or like the everyday economy, and seeing them as part of the same thing, but also trying to, as much as possible, trying to mass produce artworks, make them something that's actually useful, something that people consume literally. And so when I was at Soylent, I made a lot of food prototypes and things, and designed flavors for food, and some of them were released on the mass market. Um, and I also became very interested in the kind of ecology of food, or the ecological impact of food production. And many of you might know this already, but food production is one of the most, as a sector, it's one of the most CO2 heavy kinds of human activities. So obviously there's transportation. Food production pretty much rivals transportation in terms of how much greenhouse gases it emits, which obviously contributes to global warming. It uses out of any human activity, it uses the most land by far, and also the most water. And a lot of that has to do with, well, obviously having to feed a very large planet, a large population, but most of it actually has to do with the things that we choose to eat and the ways that we choose to produce them. And so kind of getting involved in that question and really thinking about it, in my days after Soylent, I was thinking of, what are, if there was an ideal food staple, or kind of ideal food substance, what would it be? And I arrived at algae, and this isn't like my idea. I mean, there's scientists have been talking about algae as a possible food, that could, in a very sustainable way, feed the entire population. So it wasn't my idea, but it was something where, just in looking into all of this stuff, and reading more and more about it, and also knowing a little bit about the food industry at that point, I thought that it is possible to make a product with algae, and maybe make a company that that produces algae, and tries to kind of make this happen at this point in time, when it seemed pretty urgent about obviously things like climate change, it seemed like this is something that could have a beneficial impact on that, and also just to get the idea out there of algae in particular, as a way to help mitigate some of these effects of the food industry, and potentially mitigate, slow down climate change, or otherwise have some sort of impact on human resource use. So yeah, that's pretty much how non-food came about, and it's a team effort. It's an actual company, and yeah, the other co-founders are Lucy Cheney and Dennis Oliver Schroer, and then there's been some people that have a kind of cast of people that have worked on different projects with us throughout the years. So yeah, and it is a real product. I often get asked that, since whenever you're putting something in the kind of art context, there's a tendency that people will kind of think that it's just an artwork, or it's fake, or it's about, or they might think, this is something that happens a lot, they might think that it's about these topics, but in fact, yeah, it's about them, but it actually just is this thing. It actually is this kind of algae protein bar that, from how we designed it, it has a very good kind of ecological footprint, much lower than most other foods. And I think I should probably talk a bit about the flavor. So I designed the flavor in the bar, and that was kind of took place over a long stretch of time, over many iterations, but the flavor is designed to be kind of abstract, and to kind of not to cover up the algae, but to kind of work with it, add some additional layers and nuances, and create something different, but not to cover it up. And but it's not a flavor of anything, and that's something that was interesting to me about artificial flavors, is like thinking about the flavors as just the molecules that make them up, not thinking about it as representational, like raspberry flavor or strawberry flavor, but just thinking of it as like 2-acetyl formate flavor, so like just different molecules in different proportions making up the flavor. But yeah, that's pretty much the story of this piece. And obviously it's in a vending machine, which I think because of COVID is not functional, but theoretically you could eat those bars, I think.
That was the original plan, was to, they were going to be free, and, pre-COVID, you're going to be able to go in, we would give you like a coin or something, and you would be able to take the non-bar, and once you left the galleries, you'd be able to eat it. But unfortunately right now, we don't know how we're going to distribute those just yet,
But the vending machine is very much installed in the gallery, and it is very much operational, so you can get one of those. And you really just blew my mind when you mentioned that you designed the flavor to not taste like anything else, because Tina and I have sampled the bar, mm-hmm. and it does not taste like anything else I've ever had in my life. Awesome. But we're already kind of getting sort of low, and I don't want to take any time away from our last artist. So Cedric Smith is an acclaimed self-taught painter and photographer currently living and working in Macon, Georgia. Much of Smith's work draws inspiration from the absence of positive portrayals of African Americans in advertising that he observed as a child. Smith's work has been written about and exhibited extensively, and resides in collections all over the United States, including the New York Historical Society, Coca-Cola Art Collection in Atlanta, and the Mint Museum in North Carolina. And so last but definitely not least, I'd like to welcome Cedric Smith.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
You're loud and clear, buddy.
Okay. Yes, thanks. First of all, thanks for inviting me to this. It was really a shocker to me to be, this is our first Zoom, so you got to, this is a virgin to this here. But my work, it basically started off of me trying to address the absence of blacks in advertisements. I've always been fond of signs and just lettering and billboards and stuff like that. But when I was a kid, I didn't really see that many imagery of us in it. And so my first series, actually, before I did the food, was postage stamps. And that started off from me listening to one of my favorite rap groups, Public Enemy. And in one of their songs, they said most of our heroes don't appear on those stamps. And that was like a light bulb to me. And I was like, okay, that's my first series, postage stamps. So I started off doing that, just putting everyday people from the mailman to police to teachers on postage stamps. But then as time went by, I still thought more and more about the negative portrayals of blacks that I used to see in a lot of the vintage advertisement, especially around food. You would see the imagery of blacks with watermelon or put them with chickens. And at first I was like, I didn't quite get it, because I'm like, okay, who doesn't like watermelon? We're not the only ones who eat watermelon. So I addressed it by doing paintings of kids with watermelon, but I just wanted to put a more positive spin on it. And so we wouldn't be so, I guess, shamed of seeing these imagery. And this particular piece here with collard greens, is once again, it's like, we love collard greens, and I wanted to show that, but then I kind of played off of the whole, back in the days, I don't know if they still even have them, but the Cabbage Patch Kids, I don't know if they still do those, but and this was my way of our Cabbage Patch Kids, but with collard greens or turnip greens, and so the little baby. I also thought about how, like, our parents would give us nicknames like Sweet Pea or Pumpkin and stuff like that. So that was my way of addressing this. And I make all these paintings look a little vintage and old, because I'm trying to say, what if they had done these back then? What would they look like now? If I was to go to an antique shop or dug them up, what would they look like now? And in this particular piece here, Southern Fried, it was just a name I kind of came up with. I used to always think, like, us kids who were born or raised in the South, we're just Southern Fried. And that's how that came about. But the chicken, I used to love chicken. I still do. I got tattoos on my arms of chickens and roosters. And I always felt like this was really like our logo in a sense. And as kids, I used to always imagine us riding the chickens. I don't know why. I even did a series of kids, like in a derby, and they were riding chickens. And the chickens were addressed just like how the horses are in the Kentucky Derby, with the numbers, the mask on and stuff like that. So this is supposed to be, the Southern Fried is, like I said, more relating to about kids raised and born in the South. But all of my painting still comes back to identity and absence of blacks, and how that affects us to this day. Because I always felt like we didn't have that many representations of us, and you didn't really have enough self-worth when you don't see. It's like that slogan: if they don't see it, they don't be it. And this is my way of hoping that, kids or people who see these imagery in museums or wherever, that they can really kind of start feeling a little bit more better about themselves, and know that they're just as important here, and they're Americans also, and their contributions to America. And so that's it, really. But like I said, thank you for inviting me, and I don't want to get too drawn out here, but thanks for inviting me.
No, thank you, Cedric. And we have a few minutes for questions. And so if you would like to comment or ask a question of one of the artists, you can feel free to enter that into the chat, or you can use I think there's a hand raise function. And we have a hand up already, Lydia Cheney. There you go. So we'll unmute you as you raise your hand, and you'll be able to ask your question. So Lydia, if you'll unmute, you can ask your question.
Okay, I'm now unmuted. Cedric, I love your work. I love Southern Fried. Now, please tell me why you made the chicken so large and the figures so small.
Well, to me, I just look at everything as from a kid's eye, and so how things can be larger than life to them, and so that's why the rooster is bigger than he is. Because, like I said, I wanted this whole idea of the kid being able to ride the chicken, so or the rooster. And so that's why the rooster is actually bigger than the kid himself.
All right. Now, my husband is sitting here. You have a comment?
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Lydia. Let's see. So feel free to raise your hand if you have any more questions. In the meantime, Cedric, I have a question.
Carnetta and Norm Davis have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Y'all should be able to unmute yourselves.
Okay, Cedric Norm Davis. That's my work. The bushel of collards.
Oh, okay.
And we actually bought that at auction because we loved the work and we knew basically what you were trying to accomplish. But we really enjoyed hearing the parallel between that and the Cabbage Patch dolls. So I'll tell you, thanks for the presentation, and we look forward to seeing some more of your work at some point.
No, and thank you for your support too. Thanks.
Cedric, you mentioned the sort of accessibility of your work to children. And so earlier in the week, Tina and I were sort of doing our research and looking at some of your work. And we just noticed in your collections that, you know, the institutions that own your artwork, there's a lot of public collections in there in sort of unexpected, like not necessarily like museum settings. Is that intentional on your part?
No, I just, not really, but I also understand that, like as a kid, I only went to a museum once. And I have to keep that in mind that a lot of kids, they just don't get a chance to go to a museum. So that's not my big mission in being in a museum. I mean, if it happens, it happens. But I think it's more, it would be solved more if it was more into corporate collections or me just putting them out there, whether I'm going to school, talking to kids, and I'm making posters on my work, because it still goes back to the whole thing about them seeing it and being it. And I think it's more important for me to have my work on a poster to give it a kid that he can take home. And so it's a constant reminder when he wakes up or whenever they look at their poster that it's a representation of them. But being in a museum, like I just don't see it. I mean, they're taking the art programs out of schools and all this, and it's like, how are these kids going to see it there? They have to see it in some other form, and so that's basically why. But museums have purchased my work. I'm just, and I hate to say this, but I just don't put all the information I'm supposed to put on my resume. But they are in museums, and I need to be better about that. But
no, and I didn't mean to imply that they weren't in museums, but I noticed you had a lot of public sort of corporate institutions on there too.
Yeah, I think mainly because, and this one thing I really do like about my work is that the everyday person just love them. They just love them for what they are, and I think that's what happened with some of the corporations. They just like Coca-Cola. I did a painting of Coca-Cola, and I remember getting a call from Coca-Cola, and I was like, oh crap, I thought they was calling me about copyright infringements or something like that. And they were like, no, we want like 4 of your paintings in our collection. And it just, that blew me away. But then I thought about the importance of how, when I did see those Coca-Cola advertisements back then, I really didn't see blacks in it. I mean, black in them. So that was like my way of, I guess, being in advertising with blacks in it. But, you know, and now kids can see that.
I think we have a question. Scott Miller.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
So, Sean, I have a question for you. So we have seen
exhibitions from you incorporating fragrances and beverages, and now the bars. What is it that you are currently working on? What's next for you?
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting, because it's actually somewhat food related. So I'm glad you asked. So one thing I've been working on this for about a year, maybe almost 2 years in some ways, but I've been actually developing new breeds of different plants. And I've been doing it through a technique that's been in use through the 20th century, but they don't use it as much anymore to produce new varieties. But the technique involves exposing seeds of a plant to radiation to induce randomized mutations. And then from that batch of seeds, I kind of grow those plants. And then there's another step of kind of self-pollinating them. And then that's where most of the mutations show up in the next generation. But I'm particularly working with tomatoes, also growing morning glories, which I started growing as a more just ornamental, just interesting to look at plant. I actually like the kind of vining structure quite a lot, even more so than the flowers. But in fact, it's actually quite a good food source. I did some research on it, and because I just started eating some of the leaves, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. You know, tastes pretty much like a salad green or something. And I did some research, and they are, edible, and the nutritional profile is pretty similar to spinach. And so I'm going to actually propose that as a food as well, or it is already a food, but yeah, kind of developing new versions, new breeds of that through this kind of process, and many other plants, but those are two of the kind of more food related ones.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, I think we're about out of time, y'all. I just want to thank Henry and Cedric and Sean and Andrew for all taking time to be with us tonight. This is just the first of a basically semester-long series of programming. Hold on. Lydia's raising her. I think Jim Sokol might have a question. One last question to end the night. Can we unmute Jim?
Muted.
A comment. Go ahead. It's Jim.
Okay. Michael Strauss wanted everybody to know that he couldn't be here, but his contribution to the subject matter of a la carte is that he is in Turkey.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
So I did want to, there are a lot of people at UAB that sort of help us do what we do at AEIVA, but there are two core Team AEIVA people who are not on camera tonight, Christina McClellan and Shalika Lassiter, who were definitely instrumental in helping produce everything that you saw here tonight in the exhibition itself. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, we will have sort of a limited public engagement plan that we'll be rolling out in the next week or two, and so follow our social media or check our website for that. Next week at this exact same time on Tuesday, we will have a artist talk from Emily Eveleth, who is the artist that you've seen on all of the a la carte advertisements, the giant peak donut. She's going to give us a very special sort of behind the scenes look at her process in creating those paintings. But otherwise, I just want to thank everyone for coming. And am I forgetting anything, Tina?
I don't think so. Just stay up to date because we, like John said earlier, we have programming specific for a la carte all the way through December. So like you said, we're trying to incorporate all the artists that we can. That's the really positive thing about everything going virtual, as we were able to have the 4 artists here tonight, and we're going to continue to have as many participate that want to. So again, thank you, Cedric, Henry, Andrew, and Sean. You made tonight really special. So thank you for joining us tonight. And check our website for when we have updates for when you can come see it in show. The show in person, because you're not going to want to miss it. It's incredible.
We are very proud of the exhibit, so it would mean a lot to us to let a few people in to see the exhibit. So good night, everyone.
Good night.